Hey, welcome back. In this mini lecture, I'm going to talk about cognitive load theory. Two questions: what is cognitive load theory and what are the implications? Cognitive load is the amount of information working memory, I call that WM here, can hold at one time, and that's from Sweller in 1988. What are the implications of this idea? Well, working memory has a limited capacity. As a result of that, number two, teaching technology initiatives should avoid overloading working memory with additional activities that do not directly contribute to learning. You don't want to overwhelm cognitive load, so just try to take account of that. The idea of cognitive load theory builds upon the model of human information processing, aka the stage theory model, from Atkinson and Shiffrin way back in 1968. Here's a depiction of it. Incoming info goes into sensory memory where it could be forgotten. However, if you rehearse, it can stay in working memory. If you don't rehearse, it can be forgotten. Ideally, through rehearsal, it can be encoded into long-term memory where it can be retrieved indefinitely. Here's a better look at it. For example, of cognitive load theory, if you had to choose one model to look at, which one would you prefer, figure 1 or figure 2? According to cognitive load theory, you'd pick on number 1, the label diagram, figure 1, because it places lower demand on working memory than labels listed on the side, as in figure 2, because you have to make those connections to the numbers that are labeled and listed. You can extend working memory in a couple ways. First, the modality effect. To think about it this way, your mind processes information separately through the auditory or visual channels. When they're in auditory items and working memory do not compete with visual items the same way as two visual items, such as a picture and text, compete with one another. For example, if you're having a explanatory information and you're using working memory for a complex visual diagram, if you have additional text, which is visual, that is more impactful on working memory than if you had a narration, which is audio. So basically, there's too much visual. The other way to extend working memory is to use the schema effect. Here, working memory treats an established schema and knowledge structure as a single item. So if you have highly practiced automated schema, they barely count towards your against your working memory. Learning activities that draw upon existing knowledge expand the capacity of your working memory. I'll give you an example. So say if you're learning sports, like you're learning how to volley a tennis ball. So it's basically hitting a ball. If you had a person who basically had a racket and a ball and just hit the ball against a wall without a partner, so they're just doing that on their own time. If you taught him or her how to serve, it wouldn't be super hard because they already have the schema in effect about how to hit a ball. One way to deal with the schema effect, which again is the working memory treating an established schema as a single item, is in an application. You want to pre-train, which is teaching people prerequisite skills before introducing a more complex topic. This helps to establish schema that extend their working memory, and they can understand and learn more difficult information as a result. For example, if someone's learning a new sport like tennis, if you have a regular player and you had a new player, if you want to teach a regular player how to serve, because they already know how to do that, they already have a schema, it's easy. If you had someone new who hasn't hit a ball at all, not against another player, not against a wall, but just learning how to serve, it would be harder for them to do it. There are 4 basic learning considerations for cognitive load theory. You want to measure your expertise and adapt your presentation accordingly. For example, the more expertise that you have developed in a particular area, the more information you have available in your schemas. It doesn't matter how complex the schema is, it counts as a single item in your working memory. For example, in terms of an application, you want to adapt your instruction to reflect students' expertise level. For example, if someone's learning how to write, if it's just K-8 level and they're learning how to spell because they're not very sophisticated, versus a college area, you're learning a complex flow of ideas. So depending on the expertise, you adapt your presentation accordingly. A second consideration is to reduce the problem space. The problem space is basically the gap between a current situation and your desired goal. If it is too large, working memory becomes overloaded. So an application of that would be to break down a problem into parts. This helps to reduce the problem space to lighten the cognitive load and makes learning more effective. For example, if you're learning to code, you would use different user interfaces to bridge this problem space. As an example, a novice might use a visual interface while a sophisticated college student would use code syntax. Number 3, reduce split attention effect. If you have multiple visual information sources, such as text, diagrams, or labels, they divide attention between them. This adds to the cognitive load. As a result, it makes it more difficult to create new schema. So an application example of that would be auditory. You'd want to remove any extraneous noise sources. So for example, if you're teaching a class, you want to close the door. Visually, you want to integrate visual information more seamlessly. For example, remember we talked about the different figures. You want to focus on figure 1 versus figure 2. Again, you see that the integration of visual information is much better in figure 1 than figure 2. Finally, the 4th learning consideration, use auditory and visual channels in working memory. You want to try to overcome the split attention effect by replacing some visual information with auditory information. This helps to reduce the cognitive load on people's visual working memory by using auditory channel because it has its own memory space. For example, here's an application. It would be worse if you had a visual animation. Animation is visual. It'd be worse if you added on-screen text, and it'd be better if you had an animation and you had an audio narration. In the first case, you have 2 visual channels being used, while the second is split between oral and visual. So there you have it. That was cognitive load theory. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you again soon. Take care.